Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. This is Shirley with the Spirit of Matter. And it is a Venus hour, as you can notice by my singing. And this is basically Venus night. So lots of Venus, but I'm actually not talking about Venus. So let's just give reverence to Venus because she's in Capricorn and she's dealing with a square to Lilith. So she's ruling Lilith but is squaring Lilith. And to me, I found that today a very interesting discussion that I had on the bus. So suddenly a driver was arguing with a passenger that she didn't want to get inside. So maybe she had some trauma or something like that. And he stopped the bus. So she said, okay, then open the doors. I will come out, and refused to open the doors. Because he was in between stations. And then, of course, that developed to him trying to command her, and her like, no, open the freaking door. And then some other woman who was an older woman, which is Venus Capricorn. Capricorn is older people, who was also religious. She was mentioning God, and Saturn is also orthodoxy. She began to shout at the woman. Okay? I schooled her a little about trauma. I schooled the driver a lot about trauma. That is also at the hands of the police, at the hands of lawyers that tend to cases of the way people with CPTSD are integrated in society, especially after sexual boundary violation, especially not just women, but especially women. And I'm recording. And what I found very interesting is, like, I was thinking about this whole thing, and I'm like, hey, what happened here? And I was like, oh, Venus is squaring Lilith. Okay, so there we had an older woman, quite orthodox, that didn't quite get the point, and she was more traditional, like yelling at the woman instead of, and in Israel we have kidnapped people that are 400 days probably in hospitals in Israel, but but the public doesn't assume that. And anyway, they're going through trauma of jailing, being given orders, rape and torture, and MK Ultra and stuff like that. And so society at large needs to be prepared to contain these people. And I talk about that, but that was a situation where I took action. And that was very interesting, how this encounter between that older woman who is like more traditional and is like trying to shush the woman. She's like, oh, I'm hurrying to my work, and she's trying to shush the woman rather than to order the driver to open the freaking door. Okay? Because that could have been really endangering the life of the driver himself. And putting everybody at risk, because people with CPTSD, they cannot be in a claustrophobic space or an agoraphobic space. So it should be given, whether it's war veterans, and this is also the time to revoke people like Basser van der Kolk, who create satanic division between this trauma and that trauma, where the principles where you need your housing, you need that independently of ability to work, you need access to ability to make a living that is supporting of your recovery. You need spaces that are compatible with claustrophobic and agoraphobic people, access to nature that actually balances the nervous system, to be believed for your testimony. You talk about MK Ultra and stuff like that. So the artificial division is satanic. It is a part of MK Ultra, okay? And so, but that is kind of like the larger issue. But the particular argument began fantastically between a woman that is older, Saturnian, okay, that's an older woman, Saturn, Venus, Capricorn, Venus, hurrying to the job, very Venus, Capricorn, and it was in square with the equity of, like, darling, you yell at the driver, okay? Yell at the driver until he's so shocked that he's like allowing you to get in the driver's seat and press a button, as far as I'm concerned, but you do not yell at the veteran, the person with the trauma, the person that needs to open the door, okay? So that was the Lilith part. And Lilith, of course, is ferocious. But it was very interesting that the main thing was between the driver got his, but the main thing, it was between one woman and another woman. And so that's a little Venus story for you. For Venus. And funny enough, in Israel, they say it is day of noting the struggle against violence against, I don't know what the damn fuckery, okay? None of that. But that was an occasion. Now moving on to the topic of discussion. Mercury is turning direct today. Indirect. Mercury. I love talking about the Mercury direct and retrograde phase because it is so meta, okay? I just show you what the Mercury retrograde looks like. So it's turning retrograde today, which means we get confused between polar opposites. We get documents missing, documents returning. Maybe some Timamundi talisman will return, maybe some crystal dildo, which I would need to throw anyway, even if it would return. We get correction for texts and stuff that we did. But what we have to remember, it's returning on degree 22 to kill and be killed. So we're gonna have to fix something, okay? When it comes to that degree. Because this degree is such a lethal degree, this is a very sensitive retrogradation of Mercury. Mercury Sag is in detriment, but it's usually more, satirical, and people would be more concerned about like the square with Saturn, which is annoying, okay? It is something to be concerned about, but generally what we worry about is things going missing, mistakes in contracts or business deals or anything of that sort. I like the fact that Jupiter is no longer on the malefic 18 degrees, so we have one less poisonous, okay? And the retrograde is we're gonna be finding more things to do with news about killing or murder, particularly murder. Cold cases, we might have to revise something, we might have to go back to look over. For example, today I was like, Mercury is taking so long at the 22 because it's stationing, and I'm like, I'm not doing any more cold cases today. I'm too exhausted, I'm too tired. And there were 2 cases, by the way, 2 new cases that were uploaded. But I was like, I'm just so exhausted. Okay? And we are going to be going over that degree. This means that the 22nd degree and to kill and be killed are a mark when it comes to this retrogradation, which is going to make it a crimes against humanity type of thing. And we are to be reminded that what are crimes against humanity? What crimes against humanity have been taking place in the last decades? What is the penalty for crimes against humanity? Okay? But we are also going to be revising the practicality of death penalty. Okay, for example, nitrogen was not working so well in USA in the experimental executions. I made an episode about this. You want to check my episode when I talk about that. I think I talked about like a suicide and execution, kind of like a discussion on that, because we talk about death penalty for crimes against humanity, and of course, instead of those who try to put us in a ghetto, in a jail experiment, it is necessary and imperative. If they don't stop the death, right? Because it's like that would bring death upon humanity. So that's the we the people part But then when it comes to the practicalities of execution, there would be things that we would need to learn to revise, to understand. You can't expect some big authority to be doing that, okay? Discussions about United States and the Second Amendment, invoking the second, which weapons, which that, I think that is going to be less and less, like people are going to have less and less tolerance for sensitivity to the type of weapon that you can invoke the second with. Law, okay? So again, when we have corruption in the justice system, it's going to be very challenging to maintain the legitimacy over the monopoly over power, okay, when it comes to those things. And we also have to keep in mind that might is not right, might is not always right, and abuse of power when it comes to weapon, execution, killing, murder, would lead to the next people being marginalized, and the next people being marginalized, and the next people, okay, just like the good old saying, okay, first they took the children, then they took the women, then the men died by the hundreds, and then we lost 2 generations of men, and then women could open a bank account, okay? First they did medical experiments in the Cold War with veterans. Oh, wait, flip that. First they did a documentary on women and fertility, then they did the MK Ultra on men in the Cold War. Then if you even escaped emotional violence, you were drugged and tagged. Then the C word, then the V word, okay? There's a telos to that, and it's almost a century old. So we have to, this is a good teaching to keep in mind, because while we cannot control what will be the actions, okay, some people might take action on this Mercury, and that might be lethal, and that might be wrong as well, okay? The fact that the power goes to the people doesn't necessarily mean that they're better by 100 times than the government, okay? That we said, so eventually this is people and structures. But we also have to keep in mind that when they're not so good at it, the implication, the telos, is as follows, okay? So the people themselves can perpetuate the same problems that the government can when they are using, when they try to be right with might, or alternatively when they're completely wrong but they're abusing their power. And so it's not for nothing that before even the Pluto ingress, I said the sky that punishes the land loses mandate of the heaven, be it Mao Zedong or we the people. What it basically means is that when we are abusing of power on that which we deem that we can, okay, which is a yin. Yin is more correct than a feminine, okay? Because feminine can be confusing. It can be men, it can be conquered people, it can be children, it can be many things. Just today I saw a picture of Elon Musk in a red dress that somebody put as a meme and say, let's spread Musk memes before he wakes up from his night ketamine binge or something. So ketamine, by the way, is used to treat PTSD. And the red dress is reminded me of the IDF picture that came as another ceremony that looks very much like what the Nazis did. And again, I remind you that the Wagner Fund is not the common soldiers, and those things are arranged by satanic cults. And unfortunately, all armies are cults. Okay, it is unfortunately the way that the army is currently running the world. It's very difficult to get away from that, and all army service is mandatory. You don't choose to get recruited. And when you take in MK Ultra into account, you understand a little bit more of why I say what I say. Mars matures at 28. Usually recruitments are at 17, 18, which is not compatible to make decisions in the battlefield, okay? Although even these young people might have good judgment and good behavior, and usually the problem is coming from above, where something else is designed, and it's not about defense or protecting people, but about perpetuating a constant world war, which is a part of satanic cults, okay? That's like, don't we know it by now, right? And so that picture of Elon Musk juxtaposed with the IDF, which is leading to IVF because that's losing sperm count and fertility, both for women and for men, for wombs and for semen people, okay? And that kind of is another showcase of Mars in Leo, but it's also denoting of the picture, okay, that is used basically as a draconic measure to control and oppress. So, and it's not, now we are doing that to Musk, because Elon Musk never posted such things. He posted a lot of weird stuff that I didn't like and so on. I once blocked him because of an eggplant that he sent to other people that he fired, okay? But he never posted anything of like that red blood ritual that I remember. Haven't been constantly following him. It was totally unprovoked and totally satanistic. So I can see human ritual sacrifice denotations when I note them, and I don't have to agree with the political opinion of the person who is in the picture to speak up, okay? And so that is a reminder, because Mercury 22, yes, it can be a picture, it can be a story, it can be something of that sort, but it's also like it's going to ask us to hold the understanding that this entire Mercury retrograde is for us to bridge the practicalities and the ideology of crimes against humanity and the death penalty, and to tend to the problem of might, of the fact that might is not always right, and begin to assess that, okay? So, but the fact that this is the degree of retrogression, it marks the entire cycle. We're gonna have to keep that in mind as we go through the topics one by one that we go through. Okay? For example, there are things that people don't even consider. For example, if you talk about the use of yin depletion or degradation through yin motifs, through dresses, to try to make something look like a woman, as another issue of victim blaming. And for example, victim blaming can be life-threatening to the victims. So I think when people don't know that is, on the one hand, it's a trauma reaction of offenders. On the other hand, it can be lethal to the women and the men that have been through that. And that sparks up a reaction, okay? So some people might not know that one thing lead to another thing, lead to another thing. And also we may discover actions that were taken against people in order to assassinate them. So, for example, if you're a lawyer office and you accept a lawsuit for defamation that is like a Me Too case that was publishing, hey, so-and-so did that and that to me, and you as a lawyer accept this case, you might be putting in life risk the person, woman or man, to whom this happened, okay, they might kill you and commit suicide, okay? They might be in such isolation because all the help that is offered is re-victimization and perpetuating the trauma of MK Ultra, basically, okay? If you talk about psychiatric pills and shots, not even the hospitalization, if you take it outside of hospital, it causes problems for the body movement, which is perpetuating the trauma, and it causes problem with expression, which is perpetuating the trauma of not being able to say no, or that no not being heard. That can further risk the life of the offender, okay? And people say, like, what do you care about the life of the offender? Well, let's just keep in mind that the issue is to recover, and offenders are created, not born. And if you are the lawyer, you are held accountable for crimes against humanity, which is punishable by death. What is the practicality of that death? I don't know. But you also enter the territory that you may have not considered that you're entering. Or it was in the back of your mind, or you may have, I don't know, maybe you have heated argument, or you have passion about the topic, or you were growing in a satanic cult, okay? And so if I go back to the event that I had today at the bus, I realized that there was a lot of thinking afterwards. Hey, that driver was really risking his life. So he was stressed and he began to give orders to feel in control. That meeting a person, and I talk about the adrenaline reaction of, like, you can take off a truck from you. And especially, so it's a threshold. So a person can freeze, fawn, but they can also explode so much so. And instead of like exploding and opening the door to come out, the wrong reaction can come in. They can explode, slaughter the driver, and then hurt the bus, that the bus cannot drive and the door can be closed, okay? This is something we must take into account when we talk about trauma, when we talk about these prison cell experiments, when we talk about orders trauma, okay? People don't think that orders is trauma. And that's just the bus, okay? Now, within that, if that bus was not stopping, but driving, and the woman would want to calm down, that's another trauma of kidnapping, right? That can cause a chain reaction of a chain car accident. And no one is particularly to blame, okay? The bus driver is stressed, taking the wrong reaction. Maybe he had a flashback. The woman is stressed. The people are stressed. It's enough to have one trauma victim that makes the wrong reaction, whether it's a veteran or a survivor of sexual boundary violation. If you go Basser Vanderkolk, you misunderstand the trauma. You cannot predict the action that's going to happen. Okay? Mercury rules vehicles, transportation, also on air. That shit on a plane. Okay? The way we design airplanes. Are they compatible for people with trauma that have claustrophobia and agoraphobia? And if not, what is the substitution? Do we have ferries? Do we have ships? When it comes to going to work, okay, Mercury is trade. Is the workplace compatible? One more thing. I went later on Facebook. There was a group where people consult with problems that they have at work. And one of the women had a problem with the boss that she said he tells about himself that he's very impulsive and aggressive and it is kind of like power oppressive, okay? And she begins to continue like a really long story that I have to admit I didn't read everything, But immediately I was thinking, hey, that guy could be a veteran and he has some retrospection, but the pyramidal structure of the company is hurting both him, because at any point he can lose the job. Maybe he has to pay for children, maybe he has to pay for weed, maybe he has to buy from a drug dealer weed or MDMA to recover from PTSD. Okay? And then and if he grew up in a satanic cult, then he's afraid of women. Okay, like you gotta take that into consideration. And what I offered her is to set an appointment with him where they have an open door and they can drink coffee in a pleasant circumstances and discuss structural changes in the company and society that can accommodate for them both. Because he has self-reflection. So instead of pulling it to, she took it to another manager, not sure, and she's like, should I complain about him? Should I this? Should I that? It's like, hey, have a conversation. He has self-reflection. He cannot change himself. He needs to make a living. You need to make a living. The structure needs to change, okay? That's, by the way, also what I did in the Me Too case when I was in academia, except that I couldn't have the communication because it already got to the MK Ultra, which is hurting also, right? Sexual energy, ability to sex chakra, throat chakra, right? And that exploded mega trillion billion times over. Even though I took the right steps, right? I didn't litigate, I had to express myself, I talked about structural changes. I went to therapy to curate myself, to look, okay, to take care of my part of the equation. And still, the society was that unadaptable to accommodate for MK Ultra intelligence person who is also war veteran, is not just the physical, and someone with already came with PTSD, both from workplaces and from, life, and attempt to kidnap her as a child to MK Ultra by a doctor at the hospital. And you put this juxtaposition of these two people together when I came to university to retreat. Okay? Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's what's up. Okay? So, so Mercury will square Saturn, and this is a kind reminder not to get yourself involved in death penalty for crimes against humanity considerations unprovoked. Okay? That means everyone around. Saturn is in the sign of Pisces, which is to do with drugs, medicine, psychiatrists, even energy healers. Okay, so when the clock strikes 12 and people want to take off things from the web, no. This is crime against humanity, which is punishable by death. If you are the administrator or the lawyer or the publicity person, but then there is also the question, practicality, what is death with dignity, both in the case of execution and assisted death. We currently don't have clear answers. The most promising product on the market for assisted suicide was tried as an execution in the United States, and the testimony was of those were the worst 22 minutes that I have seen in my life witnessing a person being executed. Even if you think about, hey, that person deserves no right, I already explained in another video why that thinking is false and how, even if from the position of putting the wrong person in jail. But another thing is the witnessing, the person who performs the execution. That is also traumatic. To be ending a person's life, even if it is inevitable, it is war trauma. We must remember that also when Mercury is not on the 22nd degree, because it's going to be all along, even when it goes direct, in its shade period until it crosses the degree which it is today again. Okay? So there is the first coming into power with Pluto in the sign of We the People. And the praxis. I recall when Pluto was in around this degree, when it just ingressed the first time, we had a case in the news also about a subway, and I think it was in the States. There was a homeless person that was doing some mess to get arrested. Okay, that's his way to sleep outside the street and not be arrested and in life risk more so. And the people and some war veteran began to hit him because he was basically, that was a maybe attempt of the person to regain power over his original war trauma. And the people, the masses of the people, they encourage the PTSD veteran to beat that person to death. Okay? And that is what we the people can do to we the people. You understand that when society does such thing to a homeless, entire society is going to be treated like that homeless unless we repent and correct this. I remind you that our society is currently still ruled by global cult that has an imbalance of yin and yang, that is an attempt to control and enslave humanity. They are enslaved and to control and enslave humanity. So our starting point is not so good. Okay? Anything of the old order, which means pyramidal, hidden, gaslighting, MK Ultra, MK Ultra, MK Ultra, giving orders or hypnotic orders, violating sovereignty, okay? That's not going to, how should I say it, sustain throughout this cycle of Pluto. Okay? I remind you, we have the conjoining of when people said, off with the church. No more will a king say he's representative or she's representative of God. Off with that. Separation of church and state. Off with slavery. Off with debt. Off with debt. Off with debt. No longer will debt be an excuse to enslave people. Okay? Pluto is revolving around Saturn's sign. It's not for nothing. For an entire year before this ingress and throughout this initial ingress, I did a series of astrological considerations for declarations of independence. I was not imagining this is the time we're gonna have new, whether political entities, societal entities. Now would be the time to go over that series and study it well. Because if you got a 22 moon, you have a nation of people that are assassins, and you're gonna have a prison cell very soon if it has a hard aspect to Saturn or to the ruler of the 10th. Or if you got a sun in 22 degrees, you're gonna have a tyrant who is assassinating usually the people. And you're gonna wanna know what is the chart of the election of your Declaration of Independence on the minute, because you better bet that the global satanic cults have their finger on the time while they separate astronomy and astrology. And although it does move, and you better bet that all the attempts to standardize are intentionally intended to deprive you of that cancer cure that is not torture, that causes terminally ill people to have a remission, to have improvement in their state, until budget abrupts. So you won't be getting that astrology that you'll be getting here on my channel if you've been lucky enough to be exposed to my channel before somebody offs it. You won't study that at the Masons, not unless you commit a democide or something. And it is crime against humanity to do anything against this channel that is basically containing information of prevention of crimes against humanity. That's just the French Revolution times. We have another conjoining factor, which is Uranus in the times it was between 1939 and 1941. That was the time that a Mason, Adolf Hitler, put Masonic lodges in ghetto lodge. Okay, regardless of that, the Masons were also persecuted during the French Revolution. Why? Because they think to enslave people, and that's the time in history where we tend to abolishing slavery. Both the Uranus-Taurus and the Pluto-Aquarius that right now trine. All the plans to do global dumbfuckery stuff, okay, cannot be worst time in society, and it leads to total collapse. Like it leads to extinct. Like you won't be happy for decades in a bunker. You would want to have assisted death, but if you don't know about the practicalities of assisted death, you might think that that nitrogen is good, and maybe you will have your euphoric death, but it might also end up as that 22 minutes nightmare. And in the hands of the cults that enslave humanity, what do you think is more likely? Memento mori. Okay? And nothing like Pluto in Aquarius with Mercury on 22nd degree in Jupiter sign to talk about, in Sagittarius, to talk about expansion of death cults. But also we can go back to times in society where people like the Jesuits began to appreciate the afterlife so much, and it's very likely they were going through Inquisition before that, and they began to turn to people and say, you better murder me, otherwise I will murder you because I want to get to heaven so much. Now, like I said, murdering a person, both like most of us, even if you did that once or twice in the army when you had a weapon, somebody turns to you in the street and tells you, murder me, or else I'm going to try at least murder you. You don't have a weapon. You don't expect this situation. You may have prepared yourself for different types of assaults. That was the time where the churches declared suicide a crime. And this is thanks to Al Alvarez's book, okay, Studies in Suicide. That thing is still impending on the ability of people to recover from situation of suicide contemplation, suicide attempts, because it's actually the accessibility to choice and to death with dignity that can facilitate in relief in distress, having autonomy, sovereignty, and being able to expand on that autonomy and sovereignty and basically recover from suicide ideation. If you haven't figured what is suicide ideation, it's basically the situation when a person doesn't exist, oppressed, doesn't exist, wants to die because they want to exist and live good. What's on the 11th? Anything good? We have nothing on the 11th right now. I think the moon is 22 now. No, the moon is 29. It's okay. Maybe some ascendant or midheaven was on the 11th, a lot of fortune. Oh, if it's still Venus hour, then that could be the Uranus. Kind of like, it's a reminder. That is to say, even in cases of death with dignity, we might not be shown all the details. And you want to be thinking about everything that we'll be going through in the context of this discussion. Because the retrogradation motion is on the degree 22. this is where we have a deep, serious contemplation what it means, crimes against humanity. It's way more than we could imagine that it is, and it's time for us to understand that now. Okay? What does it mean, punishable by death? Do we actually have different things going on when it's assisted suicide and when it's execution? If so, why? Is it the question of the consent or the desire to end suffering versus the coercion, that is murder? Or are there some things that we're not aware of that are intentional torture that happen in execution and is in itself a crime against humanity, punishable by death? I don't think I need to make the case against Inquisition and torture, but one giant case is you got the wrong person, and or somebody, some judge, some executionist puts the wrong person instead of them for the particular crime, usually to do with children. Okay? When we talk about punishable by death, we must keep in mind that there can be mistake, even if it's we the people and not the government that does that. We also have to keep in mind that excluding people, and I need to say that women and LGBTQ are also people, that people from different culture, race, or skin color are also people. Okay? Because when it comes to what I'm describing, for the sake of analysis, okay, an operative definition would be that they are, even if that is morally challenging on some people to accept. Okay, so we don't have to accept it on a moral basis, as an operative definition for what happens when these people that you think are bugs or slaves or, I don't know, pests, feel excluded. They may develop symptoms of behaving like a human being when they feel they have no place to go. And that is a bifurcation. Like I said, going back to the example with the bus that I had today, if there was some PTSD person on the bus, even though what triggered them is a closed door, they could run amok and they would have the adrenaline, the power to kill the driver, harm the bus. That door will stay closed, and by the time they want to break through to that door, they might get depleted and wake up in a panic attack, harming passengers. Things to consider when we want to bring the kidnapped people back and say, first let's bring them back. How many times I heard, first let's bring them back, then step by step. This is one of the steps. Was that a suicide bomber? Was that a terrorist? Was that a Muslim Arabist terrorist? No, that was the kidnapped person you brought back, but the driver wanted to close the door for some godforsaken reason, then began to give them orders and ask them to go in. Okay? Kaboom! Don't wait for the Palestinian to describe to you what trauma and its effects are. Listen to the Israeli. We know enough. You don't, like, if this is what you hear from me, then imagine how difficult it is for it to be expressed by an actual Palestinian. It's not a watermelon Mossad with the kufiyah. Okay? And that might not be the correct time, like in that bus to read. And they would also look like that Arab person with the kufiya, because they do wear kufiyas. And sometimes, I mean, that was the agricultural costume. So everybody would think they were terrorists. Where are all my free Palestine folks? Okay? All the free Palestine folks. Okay? You're running into a person with the kufiya, starts running amok in the bus. Your first thought, suicide bombers. I mean, let's face it, right? When we had the Nova issue, the Navonova thingy with the Maui and the laser and the Kela David, Safe October, right, you know, after the 73 gas oil crisis, then some people from Rahat, some Bedouin people, Arab people, Palestinian people, okay, came to help. And they come with the car, which looks like a van, the same van that they took the kidnap, and they have Arabic accent, and people are creeped to their skeletons, and they're like, no, please, we come to help, okay? And then, there are going to be a lot of refugees. There are going to be a lot of people trying to look for some place to go. And there are going to be a lot of weird operations, okay? That V thing with the Nike, with the V shape, okay? Israelis know what the V shape is. We've been seeing that since 2015 at least, before 7th October actually happened. And it's going to be like Israel. You're going to be the Israeli. Nobody's going to give a flying fuck, because there are going to be some Palestinians. You better bet. They don't take out the head of Nike, however flawed, put some WEF person, I don't know, digital marketing that flops the company, and then supposedly save it with viral use of the V shape during the World War. Do it by feet. Speaking of which, I remember I saw a kid at the bus station wearing Adidas pants and Nike shoes and eating a sandwich. And I was like, that's so funny. That's so legit, man. Okay. I think this is a proper way to say. In Hebrew, there was this obsession with this Tmunat Nitzachon, okay, the picture of like the victory. I think this is a good victory picture. Way better than the Nazi regiments with the roses and the men in dresses that are supposed to be of like women that they, I don't know, did what to. In my opinion, in my humble opinion, just remember, Okay? Now, when Pluto is finally in Aquarius for good, is a good time to remember that the way we treat the marginalized, even if we think we need to jail them, to hospitalize them, to I don't know what, is the way society would be treated in large. If the sea era wasn't enough for you to get that's what, like, anybody that has ever had any contact with mental crisis after the 2008 crisis and so on, you guys know, right? You've heard that. So when that came with the V thing, then we were like, and that would have been your family doctor of a decade and a half that you no longer can see. Okay? Who is being put instead of these doctors and the people in those works when we had a big resignation? MK Ultra, which is intelligence, which is a Masonic global cult, Rosicrucian, whatever. It's like it's programmed people. That's the closest to robots that we can get without robots. So you can begin to see what is the plan with the robots thingy. And even what you call lizard people are not robots, right? They're very, like what's happening in the world right now is that these people are literally being forced to dig their own graves. If we, the people, are too busy hating on or waiting for somebody to correct their tax evasion when they change in the currency, okay, we kind of missing the point. This is also a good reminder to think about your 22 planets if you have them. If you have, let's say, 22 Saturn in Aquarius and you are torturing people to death, how do you think your death would look like, Memento Mori? Like, do you really think that your death will look better than the death of the people that you are killing in this way? Or worse? That would be a time to consider that. And also, spirit and the matter. Okay, sexual boundary violation is what? Murder of the soul. We use the word murder for a reason. That would be a good time to consider your actions, their implications, who are you facing yourself with, okay? And what will be left after you kill all those feminine people that pissed you off? Who are you going to be left with? You don't have to call this karma. It's simple system understanding. Okay? The understanding of a system, what happens when you eliminate all the people that would be good with you, just leaving them to be. Okay? I cannot stress how much building on slavery at this point can backfire. Not whether it's sexual slavery or any type of slavery, that thing can backfire so malefically that you will want to kiss the feet of those you wanted to turn into sex slaves or slaves and beg for them to not have been hurt by you, next to what you will be left with when that yin is depleted. All the things you've been through, even since childhood, that was when in the world, a system at large, there were still women that were relatively free. Okay? Now imagine without. Okay? I don't want to imagine that. It's not something that anybody wants to even have as a possibility. Just like we don't want to deplete yang, okay? Unfortunately, the time where 2 generations of men died before women could open a bank account of their own and not have to poison the husband is also here. And these men killed themselves. Why? Because they began with killing the children and the women. So back then nobody knew what is willing consent, okay, or how to have sex that is, tantric and satisfying for both and all that. Nobody paid emphasis to that. Now we know, okay, we know that that's a thing. We know that has endocrine system implications, that has psychological implications, that has fertility implications on all parties. That would be a good time, okay? You understand that after that, let's say, woman or a soldier or child is like they're off, in whichever way it was, who is up next and in what ways? Okay? So it's sad that we have to make this conversation, but this is a conversation that needs to be had, and it better be had, because we are at the juncture of time that includes both the time of the French Revolution, with all that took place until the church was separated from the state, and the time of the Second World War, with all that entailed until women could open a bank account. And we had countries like Israel, which have a declaration of independence that is legally a legal document that has, okay, legality when it comes to rights independent of religion, origin, sex, and gender. And even that was not anywhere near enough. So imagine how much more we need to go towards having honoring yin, honoring yang, rather than depleting any of the two. Whoever you are, wherever you are on the pyramid, however visible or invisible you are, that pertains to you, lizard or not. That's a point to remember. And I think there is enough content about this Mercury retrograde not the time to abuse power, not the time to misuse power. And definitely not the time to silence discussions that perhaps look into murder cases, assassination cases, or teaching around it. That would be crime against humanity, which is punishable by death, but we still don't have a death method, okay, for that punishment. And naturally, those who will have to be the executionists cannot be those who are committing the crimes, and they're naturally less experienced with murdering people because that's like not on their daily basis, okay? They're like it's a different life, okay? So the first time somebody speaks at the bus, people are all like, I don't know what to do. The second time, maybe they come and they do something different. The third time, maybe they do something wrong. But they learn very quickly that what got people to survive the Holocaust and the Second World War was not obedience, even if it was scary and even if it could be deadly. People during the French Revolution, what got them through the French Revolution was the understanding that soil is not something you can tax, and a living space, which would later be reiterated by none other than Adolf Hitler in different circumstances, is not something that you can confiscate without deadly implications.